Hello, my name is Alejandra and welcome to my presentation dedicated to the indigenous population and its influence on Mexican history. In this presentation, I will begin by discussing the characteristics of the indigenous population. Afterwards, I will analyze the indigenous population in different time periods in the order stated, such as the Mexican Revolution, the post-revolutionary years, the late 20th century, the rise of neoliberalism, and lastly, the 21st century. Keep in mind all of the information mentioned was investigated through our class textbook and outside sources. Let us first examine the indigenous population. The indigenous population consisted of individuals residing in Mexico. Such individuals were denied the opportunity to prosper as well as wrongfully denied of their well-deserved rights. As a result, many indigenous communities endured in poverty and were forced to migrate to other regions of Mexico. Now onward to the Mexican Revolution. During this time period, the inhabitants of Mexico sought to subdue the unlawful acts of prejudice and oppression set forth to the people of the Mexican nation. The inhabitants of Mexico wanted to evade the dictation of the fraudulent government. Such inhabitants also wanted to achieve a democracy. Considering Mexico finally obtaining their independence from Spain, the inhabitants were vulnerable and were unable to resist oppression, causing them to endure an unending tyranny from a misrepresentation of government. Mexico wanted a more of a democratic form of government rather than mere dictatorship. As a result, Mexico endured in various rebellions that led to the Civil War and the Mexican Revolution. This slide is dedicated to the post-revolutionary years. According to Philip L. Russell, author of The Essential History of Mexico, the revolution was slow to impact indigenous communities. The author also stated that no specific rights were granted to the indigenous people based on their identity. In other words, indigenous rights were not of great importance to the government officials. Indigenous communities endured in poor living and working conditions as a result of government negligence. The government did not practice and guarantee rights to the indigenous population. During the 1920s, Russell states that the government began devoting more resources to improving the law of Mexico's indigenous population. This was in response to the Constitution's silencing in regards to the indigenous communities. The government concluded that the rise of poverty was a result of indigenous cultural values, moreover, a biological matter. And the Indigenismo was established to formulate without the participation or even awareness of most Indians. Supporters believed that Indians are capable of becoming educated, bilingual, and politically mobilized. Supporters also advocated for education. During the late 20th century, according to Russell, the indigenous population over the age of 5 increased from 2.5 million in 1940 to 3.1 million in 1970. The author also stated that the poverty of the Indian community resulted from mistreatment and neglect by the rest of the Mexican society. As time flew by, there was no improvement in indigenous life. As stated by Gonzalo Aguirre, the ultimate goal of indigenismo is to guarantee freedom and equality to the Indians. Most Indians found themselves in near poverty. According to Russell, the National Indigenous Institute never addressed the question of whether or not Indian culture should be preserved while being integrated with national culture. Now let us discuss the rise of neoliberalism. Neoliberalism is a model used in politics in the matters of social, economic, and other factors contributed into morphing the ideal nation. According to Philip L. Russell, indigenous people in Mexico speak 62 different languages. The author also states that Mexico's indigenous population increase resulted from high birth rates and sharply declining death rates. As stated by Russell, many individuals migrated due to environmental degradation, poverty, and population increase. During the time, Indigenous leaders demanded involvement in morphing policies affecting the Indigenous population. In 1970, Indigenous populations participated in protests in regards to freedom and equality. Many Indigenous individuals felt many authorities were abusing their power and their position towards their own benefit. The Indigenous communities also desired involvement in relations to the nation. Similar to the rural population, the Indigenous communities also faced hardships and inequality. In 1994, the Chiapas participated in a rebellion as a response to the injustice committed by the policies. According to Russell, the 1994 rebellion in Chiapas made it clear to the world that past policy had failed to meet the material needs of Indigenous people or guarantee them the rule of law. The rebellion overlooked Indian rights. In other words, laws did not apply to the Indigenous population. The author also noted that the rebellion had led to unprecedented Indian activism and protests throughout Mexico. Rebellions had one goal: to encourage Indian rights and equality. The treatment endured by the Indigenous population was perceived as degradable and unfair. Chiapas believed that the Indigenous population was misrepresented and wrongfully excluded from their rights. It was presumed that this time period would guarantee autonomy for the Indigenous population. It had also offered a peaceful settlement to the standoff in Chiapas. According to Russell, autonomy for the Indigenous people was defined at the municipal level, not the regional level. The author also stated that the 1994 rebellion, the Chiapas uprising, failed to pave the way for the right of autonomy many Indians and their supporters sought. One of the positive contributions given by the rebellion in 1994 was enabling the rest of Mexican society to acknowledge the existence of Indigenous communities. As a result, non-Indians formulated detailed plans on how to save Indians from heatheism, poverty, malnutrition, and exploitation. Russell also noted that in 2012, 72% of the Indigenous population was classified as poor. The 72% counted for 11.7% below the 15.8% increase in overall population in Mexico. And that marks the end of my presentation. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Bye.